Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's show, I wanted to talk about Gavin Newsom having arrived at Davos and his deep criticism, or his harsh, brutal criticism of Donald Trump when prompted by journalists in Davos. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Gavin Newsom arrived at Davos and was confronted by journalists who asked him a load of questions, and he launched a massive tirade against Donald Trump. Have a listen to this.
Governor Newsom, do you have a message for Europeans who are concerned about the messages from the White House around Greenland this week?
Yeah, it's time to buck up. It's time to get serious and stop being complicit. It's time to stand tall and firm, have a backbone. I've seen this in the United States, the supine Congress playing both sides, say one thing on a text or a tweet, another publicly.
It's time to have principles.
It's time to stand tall and strong.
Does that mean responding with
tariffs?
tariffs?
Time to stand united. You make that determination. I don't make that determination.
But when you say standing tall, what do you mean?
Just I can't take this complicity. People rolling over. I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. I mean, handing out crowns and this is pathetic. Nobel Prizes that are being given away. It's just pathetic. And I hope people understand how pathetic they look on the world stage. At least from an American perspective, it's embarrassing.
So what should Europe be doing?
You should decide, the Europeans should decide for themselves what to do. But one thing they can't do is what they've been doing. And they've been playing. This guy is playing folks for fools. And it's embarrassing.
Europeans think this is diplomacy and this will ultimately
this is
work.
Diplomacy with Donald Trump? He's a T-Rex. You mate with him or he devours you. One or the other.
And Europe's being
people
devoured?
need to stand, but no, the Europeans could be if they continue down this path and process. They need to stand tall, stand firm, stand united. Look, you said this a year ago we should have been having this conversation, and they didn't. Okay, and now you're paying the price. Exactly what anyone objective observer would have anticipated we'd be where we are today.
What do you think Ursula von der Leyen needs to say?
That could lead to the end of the European Union?
Well, I don't want to be hyperbolic about it, but this guy's a wrecking ball. I hope people are waking up to what we're dealing with. This is it's code red. You guys are still playing by all set of rules. Everybody, the globe is with this guy. He's unmoored. It's the law of the jungle. It's the rule of dawn. And I hope it's dawning on the world what we're up against. This is serious. This guy he's not mad. He's very intentional, but he's unmoored and he's unhinged, and it requires you. The goal is whatever he wants it to be. The goal is the world in his image.
What would your
He's
advice?
a narcissist. It's no advice. Common sense. Why don't folks do what they say publicly, what they're saying in private? Why don't they just simply do what they know is right? Everybody's talking behind his back. They're laughing at him. Meanwhile, they're sucking up to him. It's embarrassing. You're modeling behavior for our kids, generations of folks. This is not diplomacy. This is stupidity.
If they don't act, does this end with military solution in Greenland?
I don't know. Who knows what happens in that respect? But with Donald Trump, you saw what happened to Maduro.
Now, while my opinions on Gavin Newsom are immaterial, I would like to say that I tend to find myself in agreement with fundamentally what he has to say regarding Donald Trump. Once again, my opinions on Donald Trump are immaterial as well. I'm not here to tell you what to do or what to think. I'm just giving you my take on the way I see things playing out in geopolitics today. I neither like nor dislike Donald Trump. I did say, many months prior to Donald Trump winning the election the second time round, I did say to everyone, a lot of my friends and family will bear me out on this, where I did say that Donald Trump will win, and he's probably someone that America requires in order to have a reset, in order for America to return to its core values and move away from the madness that it was seen to have embraced. Now, coming back to Gavin Newsom, he's echoed pretty much everything I've had to say regarding dealings with and how to deal with a personality like Donald Trump. Donald Trump has come up as somewhat of a bully, and there's one of a few ways that you can handle a bully. Firstly, being as Gavin Newsom says, and I agree, you confront the bully head on, and that will either have the bully retreat, or the bully then realizes that you are an adversary and shows you the respect you deserve. Or you could become a victim. You could sit back and just accept everything the bully does to you, and then you've embraced victimhood, which then allows the bully to ride roughshod over you. Or alternatively, you could do what Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan.
I would say that Pakistan had nominated President Donald Trump for Nobel Peace Prize for his outstanding, extraordinary contributions to first stop war between India and Pakistan, and then achieve ceasefire along with his very wonderful team. And today, again, I would like to nominate this great president for Nobel Peace Prize, because I genuinely feel that he is the most genuine and most wonderful candidate for Peace Prize, because he has brought not only peace in South Asia, saved millions of people, their lives. And today, here in Sharm el-Sheikh, achieving peace in Gaza is saving millions of lives in the Middle East. Mr. President, I would like to salute you for your exemplary leadership, visionary leadership. And I think that you're the man this world needed most at this point in time. World would always remember you as a man who did everything, went out of the way to stop 7 and today 8 wars.
Mark Rutte and Emmanuel Macron, along with the rest of the EU leaders, have done. And that is to appease Donald Trump, to play into his ego, to make him larger than life. And that, unfortunately, then puts you in a subservient and placating position. Now, a case in point of someone standing up to the bully would be that of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, when he refused to accept American intervention regarding the brief skirmish between India and Pakistan during Operation Sindoor, when he refused to acknowledge Donald Trump's intervention in the matter, hence calling Donald Trump out. This is something Donald Trump did not like, and you saw a subsequent 180 in the way in which Donald Trump began handling India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He began heaping tariffs. India became the bad apple flavor of the month and was just targeted non-stop. And all the while that was going on, it played into the European leaders' playbook, because it emboldened them in a way in terms of their views on the Ukrainian war, and it helped escalate their viewpoint. However, as you would see, the tables have now turned, and the European Union and NATO specifically have become the bad apple flavor of the month. Now they're on the receiving end of Donald Trump's tantrums, and they're scrambling around trying to understand what is going on, what has happened, how has this madness now landed at their doorstep, and they're looking for allies from powers they have previously alienated. Because Prime Minister Modi did not pander to Trump's requests, one of the notable turns in Donald Trump's rhetoric and posturing was to embrace Pakistan and, of course, Donald Trump's favorite Field Marshal Asim Munir,
Sharif of Pakistan, and also I have to say my favorite Field Marshal from Pakistan, who's not here, but the Prime Minister is here, and you're going to give his regards. Where are you? There you go. Thank you very much. Do you want to say what you said to me the other day? Come, would you like to say what you said the other day? I think it was so nice. Please.
Thank you very much, my dear President Trump.
He even made statements about the dead, in inverted commas, the dead economies of India and Russia.
I don't care what India does with Russia. They can take their dead economies down together, for all I care.
So it goes to show that if you stand up to him, this is what you could expect. However, you will understand that you then have a more solid footing on which to negotiate with Donald Trump in future negotiations, as opposed to placating to Donald Trump and being subservient, where he then feels he has a right and he owns you, and he's going to ride roughshod over you, which is what is currently happening regarding Greenland. Now, let's look at Modi's non-willingness to bend the knee and embracing subservience towards Donald Trump, as opposed to Trump's response to him not getting his way with European leaders regarding Greenland. He released those two AI pictures, the one clearly showing subservience of the European elite to him. He also, in a mocking way, released the texts that were sent to him from Mark Rutte and Emmanuel Macron, and he also called in the United Kingdom's decision on the Chagos Islands as being a really stupid decision.
President Trump has lashed out at Britain on Truth Social, describing the decision to hand the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. He says that is great stupidity.
And he's basically said to Keir Starmer, get your house in order. He's made remarks about Macron and imposing a 200% tariff on French wines and champagnes, and furthermore stated that Macron won't be in office very much longer.
Oh, did he say that? Well, nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is, if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
In fact, I think that schools should use this Trump EU scenario as a case in point for teaching students on how to deal with bullies and how not to deal with bullies. Now, we've looked at the European perspective. Let's look at the American perspective, or the Trump perspective, regarding Greenland and the issues that have arisen. So for Donald Trump and his administration, they clearly see that an exposed Greenland is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. And they cite, the melting polar ice caps and, the rare earths underneath and the trade routes that open. Now, I'm not saying that this is right or this is wrong. I'm saying from an American perspective, let's look at it from the way they look at things. So Trump viewing this as a national security threat means that he has to then react to that threat. And he's going to do it he's going to react in a way that he doesn't care basically how it affects or impacts other nations, because his sole concern here is the United States, and he's not too concerned about what people think or say about his reaction. Now, you view Trump's reaction and the way he's going about managing American interaction with the rest of the world as opposed to that of, Sleepy Joe Biden and his administration. The United States had become the laughingstock of the world, under the Joe Biden administration. It was really a joke. Nobody took them seriously. You didn't have to be a superpower to basically have a go at the Americans. Everybody basically laughed at them and looked at them as a joke. So I think that, the powers that be decided that someone hard had to come in, and they needed somebody that could reset American ties with the rest of the world according to the way they wanted it done. And who better than Donald Trump? Because somebody that was going to come in and, be all diplomatic and cordial and follow the decorum of, geopolitics was not what was going to cut it. You needed a change to the system that was brutal. And the only person that could be brought in to achieve that was Donald Trump. You needed somebody that was a narcissist and somebody that would impose their will irrespective of what people had to say. The reason for that is because you get somebody like Donald Trump coming in, there's a reset, it's harsh, it's brutal, but then it lays the groundwork and the foundations for future presidents or future administrations of the United States to then be able to chart a course that has been planned ahead of their administration. And the only way that reset could have come in was by way of a brutal change in the dynamics, in the way in which the administrations had pivoted from the Biden administration over into this new administration. Now, coming back to the United States and how they perceive things from their end, you have to look at it that the normal status quo is asking NATO and Europe to help make sure that Greenland is protected against these perceived threats that the United States sees. Now, if Donald Trump doesn't see that Europe is strong enough, let's be honest, we've got governments in Europe that have not only sold out their people, but sold out their beliefs and what Europe stood for. Let's come to the United Kingdom. A case in point is the Pakistani grooming gangs, where, young daughters within the United Kingdom, of the United Kingdom.
1,500 children like me were groomed, abused, raped, trafficked, tortured, and some even murdered. I was crying, I was bleeding, I was trying to make sense, what had just happened, because I didn't even know you could physically do that.
Biggest part of the problem you have these days is these young girls that are dressed up, i.e. miniskirts, stuff like that.
They found this 13-year-old girl. She was almost completely naked, she was blind drunk, and she was with 7 adult Pakistani men. And South Yorkshire Police arrested the 13-year-old girl for being drunk and disorderly.
Were abused, and that was swept under the rug for many years for fear of being branded Islamophobic. Now, that was under Keir Starmer as head of Crown Prosecution Services. That same person has gone on now to head the entire country as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. What does it say about his government being able to provide security for the United States in Greenland? Not much, because since the fall of the Soviet Union, I've mentioned this, Europe has become complacent. They've relied on Big Brother. They've used their money for, instead of fortifying their defenses and building infrastructure within the country and bettering education for their own people, they've used it for these weird, stupid, fantastical projects that have just wreaked havoc, not only on the country, but also for the country's national security. So Trump is looking at it and saying, well, hang on, if you don't take your own national security, your own country's national security to heart, how can I be trusted to allow you to then look after our national security? So he's basically, in a roundabout way saying, I don't trust you. Your policies have led to the disasters within your country. We've had a similar system going on in our country until I've taken over, that is Trump. And you've seen a radical shift. So if you continue following the policies of our previous administration, or if you continue following these disastrous policies that have led you to where you are today, don't rely on us to come in, because we will only come to your aid should you then decide to change course and follow a more European model. And as these governments are trying to push back, it doesn't make sense. He's saying he sees it as a no-winner. So he, together with his administration, are saying, we can't rely on the Europeans. This is something we have to do ourselves. Furthermore, if the threat does emerge within Greenland and within Europe, they're going to rely on us anyway. So we might as well just take the lead right now, take Greenland and fortify it, so that fortifies our borders against any emerging threats in the future. Under the Biden administration, it was all hunky-dory. Everybody followed the same script. Biden supported the Europeans in Ukraine. They supported his wacky policies that they implemented. You had mass illegal immigration still going on in Europe, still going on in the UK. And you look at it and you think to yourself, but you're hollowing out your country from within. You're selling your own people down the road. So while those policies were being put in place, it was fine. However, you've got a new government or a new administration in the United States that's saying, hang on, I don't agree with what your policies are. So one of two things needs to happen. The current European governments either adopt a more favorable policy towards what Trump is setting out as his policy, which would be in line with what probably the olden European value systems were, or alternatively these governments collapse and you have, I would wager to say, a more right-leaning government coming in, which would then be in line with what Trump's policies are. However, the danger of this is you get a far-right governments coming in, and then you open the door to all sorts of nastiness, because extremities on either end of the political spectrum don't bode well for societies, as history will show. However, liberalism as well has opened the doors to all sorts of insanities that just don't make sense anymore. So you got to find a middle ground somewhere in between. Basically, the problem between the Europeans and the Americans can be summed up as such. You're trying to close the round head of a bottle with a square cap. It's just not going to work. I've just received a video from a very dear friend of mine in Norway, and I'm going to attach it here, of Mark Rutte's comments at Davos.
7 are a member of NATO, that's Finland and Sweden and Norway and Denmark, Iceland, Canada and the US. And there's only one country bordering on the Arctic outside NATO, and that's Russia. And I would argue there is a 9th country, which is China, which is increasingly active in the Arctic region. So President Trump and other leaders are right. We have to do more there. We have to protect the Arctic against Russian and Chinese influence. And that's exactly what NATO ambassadors decided to do in September. We are working on that, making sure that collectively will we defend the Arctic region.
And, he says Trump is right. Now, this can be read in one of a few ways. It can be, again, that he's placating to Trump. It can be that he's saying to Trump, yes, you are right, but let's work together with you on stemming this, which I think Trump is not too keen on. Or he can say, yes, you are right, and by this he means we've given up. Greenland is yours. Because militarily, Trump says he's not going to go in militarily, but realistically, militarily, the Europeans have nothing that they can bring up against the Americans, and they know that. So if he says, I'm not coming in militarily, but I will have Greenland, then the writing, as you say, is on the wall. And I think Mark Rutte's comments echo that. Because the flip side of that is, there being no consensus, Greenland still falls to the United Kingdom, and it becomes a messy affair for NATO. NATO trying to keep itself alive with just the Europeans looking after it is going to be a disaster. The Europeans cannot decide on simple things. They're just so indecisive. It's insane. How are they going to then be able to manage NATO? I think the writing is on the wall, and I think Mark Rutte has realized that, and that is why he said what he said, because if he doesn't, and if Greenland doesn't go, amicably to the United States, it is, the way I see it, going to be the end of NATO. And if then, it'll probably be the end of the European Union. Coming back to these policies that have been enacted in Europe and the United Kingdom, I just want to relate an incident that occurred. I was at a cigar lounge in the United Kingdom. It was just me, and the other part of the room was occupied by two incredibly polite young white English boys who happened to be brothers. And one was slightly older than the other. And the younger brother was telling the older brother how, he's continuously being told that they are bad and that they should be ashamed of what, their ancestors did by way of slavery and things like that, and how, they are a bad country that did a lot of bad things around the world. And it was something that you could see deeply affected him. It really affected him, because he felt that he had to then do something to right that wrong. So it was something that really affected him, something that the policies that were being implemented made him feel an outcast and made him feel ostracized and guilty. And then he said something strange. He said, however, now I'm being told by the same people who keep telling me how bad I am, that the Russians are at the door, war with Russia is imminent, and I need to then show my love for my country and go out and defend the country and give my life basically for the country. And he was saying to his brother, I don't understand this. If you're telling me that I'm bad, my country is bad, and as a young white male, I'm somebody that is not worthy. How do you then reconcile that with me going out there, giving my life and fighting for that very same country that I've now grown to despise? And I just sat there and I thought, what a mess has been created. What a mess. We've got a youth, a generation, or a few generations that, they are meant to be our future. And yet we've kneecapped them and decapitated them and made them feel so miserable about themselves. We've destroyed their self-worth. And then we say to them, oh, by the way, you need to go and defend the country against the Russians. Rather than encouraging them and telling them, playing to their strengths. We've told them that they are worthless. And then we're saying, oh, by the way, we need you to go and now perform the ultimate sacrifice, which is put your life on the line for something that you've been told you shouldn't believe in. It's insane. So coming back to Gavin Newsom and, his tirade on Trump, yes, I do think that he is correct. I think that Europe should have stood up to Donald Trump a while ago. I think that placating nature has led to where we are today. However, I think also from Mark Rutte's speech at Davos, you can see that they're basically just going on with this. So I think for Greenlanders, while I do feel sorry for them, I do think that they should have the right to decide whatever they want to do and whoever they want their country to be with. I think the writing is on the wall, and the Europeans have come to their senses and realized that there's no way out of this. So I think they're already making plans to have Greenland ceded to the United States. I want to thank you for spending your time with us on this short video, and I encourage you to please like, share and subscribe to our channel, as it helps us grow and it helps us with the algorithm. Until the next video, goodbye.